Is this your first time lacing up roller skates? Do you suffer from foot pain while skating? Or perhaps you just want to learn more about laces? If so, listen in on this video because I may have some helpful tips for you. My name is Carly, or Roller Ghoulie, and today I'm going to be going over quite a bit of information about lacing, so if there's something you came here for specifically, we're going to leave timestamps below so you can jump ahead if you need to. First, I'm going to start off by talking about laces, the widths, the lengths, the materials, what they're for. Then I'm going to show you the standard way or the most common way to lace up a roller skate, and then I'll be going over specific lacing techniques for bunion pain, high arches, heel slipping, and wide feet. Alright, so quickly let's go over laces. These are the poly laces that come standard on the Moxi package. They also come in white and black. This lace is generally a little bit on the thinner side. It's made of a polyester blend. This material does stretch a bit, so if you see when I give it a tug, it does stretch and it does become thinner. Now, these laces are a different brand. They're called Spark laces by Derby Laces. So they have a bit of a shimmer to them, some glitter, and they don't stretch as much. So when you see I tug on it, it isn't really stretching out or making itself any thinner. So there are different materials, and the different materials are just going to depend on how much the lace stretches. And why that matters is when you lace up your skate, if your laces have a bit of a stretch to them, then the boot is going to start to kind of stretch out a little bit in certain areas and kind of mold your foot a bit. But it also could end up stretching to the point where you have to relace your skates or retie them and tighten them up because they could loosen up on you. Whereas laces that are made up of a material that's a bit stiffer, you're not usually going to have to relace your skates. They're going to stay in place, but it does give a tighter fit. So if you're someone who suffers from tight feeling skates or wide feet, sometimes these laces could be a little bit too snug or make your boot feel a bit too snug. But it is personal preference, so you can definitely give it a try for the different variations. The other difference is the thickness. So you have thinner laces and you have thicker laces, and they actually come even thicker than the black one here. The thicker ones are really nice for having the laces stay in place and makes your skate feel really secure around your foot. However, it is more difficult to get the laces around the hooks and sometimes through the eyelets. My personal preference for the thickness and material, I really don't have one. I just usually skate on whatever laces came with the boot, or if I'm looking for something aesthetic like the black laces to match this boot, which is a Moxi jack that I had custom painted myself to be like a rose gold. So I thought these laces would match really nicely. Otherwise, I don't really mind. I'm not super picky about my skate stuff, but some people definitely are. Now the length. So depending on what kind of boot you have is going to determine the length of lace that you need. So these are high top boots, and what I mean by that is the boot comes high up on the ankle. A low top boot is usually cut much lower on the ankle. So high top boots generally need about 90 to 100 inch laces. You can even go higher up to 108 or 118. Again, this depends on how wide your foot is, how much the boot is stretching to fit your foot inside of it, and some people like to wrap their laces around the ankle before they tie it, and that would need longer laces, but the standard lace is typically 90 to 100 inches long for a high top boot. This is different from low cut boots, and usually you can look that up, whatever brand skate you have, you can look up the stock laces that comes with it and see the inches of it, and that will give you a guide of what laces to buy. The next important thing to know about laces is wax laces. So these are actually wax coated laces. There are polyester laces that this brand makes, and then they also make wax coated laces, as a lot of brands do, and the wax is supposed to keep the laces in place. This is really, really common in hockey, for example, because once you lace up your skates, you don't want those laces to be moving around anywhere. You don't want to have to relace them. So the wax is supposed to keep the laces perfectly in place and keep that knot that you tie at the top to stay there and not come untied. So the wax is just a little bit tacky and keeps the laces together. Not everyone prefers wax laces because, as I said, it can be a little bit tougher to lace them up and get them around the hooks. but a lot of people do prefer them, so this really is personal preference. It is a nice little benefit to having wax laces, but again, not absolutely necessary. It just comes down to personal preference. You may have also noticed that there's a ton of different colors and patterns out there from different brands of laces. Usually the color and the pattern variation has nothing to do with the material of the lace and everything to do with the aesthetics. These options are really just to make the skater create a customized boot that feels like them and really gets to showcase the creativity of the way that they customize their skates with different accessories. You can find many of these variations in colors and patterns on moxiskates.com. So now that you've picked out the laces that you want, let's lace them up. I'm going to show you the standard or the most common way to lace up roller skates. So to start, you're going to take one end of the lace and you're going to loop it under through the first eyelet. You're going to do the same on the other side. I like to make sure that it's nice and flat and it's not twisted. And then you're going to bring up the laces and just match the length. The reason why you want to match up the length is so that way by the time you get to the top, they're even on both sides. So now you're going to take one side of the lace and you're going to crisscross to the other side. So you're going to alternate sides. Going to one, and then I'm going to skip an eyelet and jump over to the next one. Again, trying to keep the laces flat and not twisted. Skip an eyelet, go to the next one. And I'm staying with the same lace. I'm not alternating laces right now. I'm just going all the way up with one. Skip an eyelet, go to the next one. Okay, so now that I've gotten to the top and I'm at the hooks now, I'm going to take the other side and repeat the process. Alright, so now that we're at the top, at the hooks, this is the part that you may have heard this before, but if not, this could be new to you. A lot of people want to actually lace under the hooks, but that's not the way you're supposed to do it. I myself do it the wrong way. So if you're like me, don't feel bad. It's very common. You actually want to go over the hook and come under. So once again, instead of going this way, you're going to be going this way. So you might be wondering why you go over instead of under, and this is to keep the hooks in good condition. Sometimes doing the under method could pull the hooks out of place or twist them up and cause damage to them over time. It also creates a tighter fit and more ankle support when you do it the over method. I wouldn't say that doing it under is wrong or anything terrible is going to happen. When I get out to the skate park and I'm lacing on my skates, I just want to get out there, so I do it super fast and I go, and I'm not really paying much attention to it, but I do know that this is technically the proper way. So now that you're at the top of the hooks, you're just going to tie a standard bow of your choosing. Some people, if they have a lot of extra lace, they will wrap the laces around the ankle. Depending on how wide your ankle is or how much room is left with the laces. Some people tie a small knot, some people tie a big bow, some people wrap it around. That's up to you. So it should end up looking something like this. Probably a little bit nicer when there's actually a foot inside. But this is the common lacing technique for a high top roller skate. How do you lace up skates for bunion pain? This one is actually something that I personally do. You might see on the skates that I use at the skate park or street skating a lot have this lacing technique. It's because I myself suffer from bunions. If you don't know what it is, look it up. But basically, your toes start to kind of lean in towards themselves, and then it leaves that outer edge to be very sensitive to pressure in shoes and skates, things like that. Skates can actually cause bunions or make them worse just because of the typical shape that a lot of boots are. So if you are someone who suffers from this pain, you are definitely not alone, and this technique has helped me a lot. So just like the standard lacing technique, you're gonna start with having your first thread come through under the eyelets. Some people like to go over because I think it looks nice. That's up to you. So I'm going to do my first crossover on each side. And now that I'm here, this is where I need to make some decisions. So depending on where the pressure is on your bunions, or even if you feel like you have a very narrow toe box and it's putting pressure on the sides of your toes, you can also use this technique. So you want to find that main pressure point. If you put your foot in the skate, it'll be easier to find it if you just push along the sides. For me, it's usually about right here that I feel the most pain. So because of that, I'm going to find that pressure point. I see it's between these two eyelets. So instead of crossing back over, because if I cross over, it's going to pull the boot. When I lace it up, it's going to pull it pretty tight and create that pressure point. So to avoid that, I'm actually going to stay on the same side and go over to the next eyelet with the lace that's already on this side. So it should look something like this. Ideally not twisted, but for the sake of the video. Now, if you suffer from the same issue on the other side, it would be the same process. And then from here, you can start alternating once again if you'd like to. If you feel like there's still a bit too much pressure, you can do it once more, going from inside and come out on the next eyelet, staying on the same side. This will relieve a little bit of pressure that it puts on those pressure points. And now I can start doing my crossover like the common technique. So it should look something about like this. Yours might look a little bit different depending on where your pressure point is. You can start at an eyelet earlier or later, depending on where that pressure feels for you. And if you're not sure, you can play around with the different placements and see what feels the best. How to lace skates for high arches. Now this technique is actually pretty identical to the bunion technique, except usually the placement of where you skip the eyelets is going to be about the same for each person. You can certainly try out different ways and see, but unlike the bunion method, the bunion one or the pressure point one is you're really looking for a specific area and you don't necessarily have to skip on both sides. But for the high arch one, it's going to look very much the same, but this is usually the way that everybody will do it. So you're going to start with the standard first under through thread. Then I'm going to cross over once on each side. And from here, instead of crossing over again like the common method, I'm going to stay on the same side and loop through once on each side. We're a little twisted, it's fine, ignore that. So now again, I'm going to come through on the inside, staying on the same side with the same lace, and come through one more time. And now from here, you can continue to lace up the standard way by alternating each side. And it should look something a bit like this. Now the reason why this technique helps with high arches is a lot of times for people that experience high arch pain, or they know they have high arches, and the pain they experience can sometimes be numbness in the front of the foot, and this relieves a little bit of pressure in the front of the foot to help with that pain. This next technique is for heel slipping. This is a pretty common issue that people experience, and what that is it's when you feel your heel lifting a little bit out of the boot. Since it's a high top boot, your foot's probably not going to come right out of the boot, but sometimes people that have low sitting boots, they can feel this a little bit more predominantly. But if you feel like your heel's lifting up a bit when you're skating, this technique could help you. For this technique, you're going to do the standard lacing technique all the way up until the last eyelet. So up until here is where you're gonna stop. So you're gonna save one eyelet at the top. Okay, so we're at the top, we have one eyelet left, and what we're going to do is with the lace that's on that side, you're gonna come through the eyelet that's right up above. And you're gonna repeat that on the other side. Okay, so now that we've made these little loops on each side that we can use, you're actually going to crisscross applesauce and you're going to loop it under that loop and come through. Same on the other side. Loop it through, come through. So now when you go to cross over and start going through the hooks, you're gonna get a little bit extra tension that comes across right through this area that should help keep your heel laying a bit more flat in your skate and can help it prevent from pushing up a bit. So once you do the full hook, you can make that as tight as you need it to be and then tie your standard bow or knot or whatever you'd like. So it should look something a bit like that. Obviously it will be different when there's a foot inside, but it's the standard lacing with the loop at the top and then you come through that loop to create extra tension. And finally, how do you lace up roller skates for wide feet or skates that feel too tight? There are actually two techniques that you can use. The first one is quite simple. It is the common crossing over method that we've already gone over, but you're gonna be skipping every other eyelet. So normally I would go straight to this next one and then start alternating sides with the same lace, but instead I'm going to skip that first eyelet and jump on to the next one. And this could get a little bit confusing if you're using the same lace and going all the way up like the other techniques we did. So for this one, I'm going to actually alternate the laces so I don't lose track of where I'm at. So again, skipping an eyelet, going on to the next one. Skipping, going to the next one. And you're going to repeat this all the way up. It should look something a bit like this. And the cool thing about this method is you don't have to skip every other eyelet all the way up. If you feel like you only have pressure or the skate feels too tight in one area, let's say just right here, then you can do that method up until this point and then start going every other if you want some tightness in certain areas and not others. So you can kind of play around with the placement there. And now the second technique for wide feet or skates that feel too tight is probably the most tricky lacing technique of all the ones we've gone over so far. This is the only one that you do have to go on top of instead of underneath. So I'm going to be looping over the first eyelet. Okay. So you can see that looks a bit different with it being laced on top instead of underneath. And the reason for this, you'll see in a second, is to create this pattern all the way up to the top. So with the same lace on the same side, I'm going to go to the next eyelet over. And now that I've gone underneath and over, I'm going to cross over to the other side. So it's created two lines at this point. So now with the other lace, make sure you're coming underneath all of that mess, almost like a bunch of wires when you're setting up a TV or something. You're gonna go to the next available eyelet on the same side and then cross over to the other side. That's parallel, the eyelet that's parallel from where you just came out. For aesthetic reasons, I really like to make the laces all flat for this so there's no twists in them, because then it just looks really nice. Now again, come underneath all that mess so you don't see that hanging out over. And then you're going to go to the next available eyelet on the same side and then cross over to the parallel eyelet. You're going to repeat this process all the way up. So actually, just kidding. I forgot that you want to save one eyelet at the top on each side. If you have a low top skate, you don't have to do this. If there's no hooks to hook your laces through, you don't have to do this. You can do that method all the way up to the very last eyelet and then tie your knot. But for this skate, because there are hooks that we need to get to be able to start crossing over onto the hooks, you're going to want to save one eyelet so that way you can come across with each lace. And now you're back to the regular way and you can start going up your hooks like normal, and it should look something a bit like this. This technique allows you to keep some areas looser if you need to. It helps you be able to stretch certain parts without having too much pressure. Like the crisscross method can create a lot of pressure on the top of the foot. So depending on exactly where the pressure is, if you have wider feet or if you have skates that feel too tight, you can try both of these techniques and find out which one works best for you. I hope these techniques helped you. If you think you might have a friend that could benefit from one of these, please share it with them. As always, your support means a lot to us here at Moxi, and we appreciate you. Happy skating!